Well, that's awesome. I think we have our next panel coming up. So I'd like to thank you, both Chris and Ada, for joining us today on this very special panel, and keep doing the great work that you're doing. We all very much appreciate it. And I think I can speak from the couple of hundred people that are watching that we all say thank you. So,
well, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. And I'm sorry Aisha is having technical issues, because she would have loved to have been here as well as the other co-chair.
Yeah, the three of you are doing amazing work. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you. And passing it back over to Trevor to start your panel with Genevieve and Jacob. Hi, guys. I'll leave you guys to it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Julie. Hello, Jacob and Genevieve. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I think it's actually a perfect roll-in from the last discussion that we had. Some of the follow-up questions that the panel, that the co-chairs received were about the future of what browsers can do. And, obviously they talked about WebXR, but I think there's the bigger context that you two are uniquely positioned to talk about. Just as a little background for everyone listening, Jacob works on the Oculus browser, and so obviously right now the main platform for that is the Quest platform, which is a virtual reality platform. And Genevieve works at Magic Leap on the see-through AR headset that they make on the browser on that. So we have a sort of as much as there's diversity within immersive browsers, that's what is represented here today. So thank you so much for being here. So one thing I want to sort of put to both of you is to talk a little bit about the context of how the browser fits into the platforms that you both work on. I know that obviously a lot of people watching today are either already or are sort of getting into web development for XR, but it has never been obvious that the web browser is the place to do XR development, especially on these new platforms. So Genevieve, maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit of how your team and your company as a whole thinks about where the browser fits in with the rest of what the platform offers.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, I think those are the questions that are industry wide, like, how does the browser fit in AR at all? And also, in like, how does WebXR fit in, with the developer community? So we all know what the benefits of the web are, right? It's, ease of building, ease of distribution, the ability to get up and running really quickly, and to get your content out there, quickly. And I think that's really where the draw is. I guess where the drawbacks are that it's still not that easy yet. It's, there's still the standard is still evolving, and it's settled a lot. It's much more useful than it was when we first started on it. And that's a testament to all the people at W3C and part of the Immersive group who have been making it. But it's also still not quite there yet. And I think it's actually, in some sense, it's bad that it's not quite there yet, because it makes it hard for browser developers like us to implement the right things. But it's also good because I don't think we, as an industry, know exactly what needs to go into it yet. So it gives us an opportunity to pivot and to put in the things that are the most important, as opposed to just blindly implementing, every and any passing idea that comes to our head.
Great. And Jacob, same question to you.
Yeah, I think the role of the browser and the web on Oculus has kind of evolved over the years. It really started out with a pretty specific focus on WebVR. In fact, it wasn't really even a browser. Project Carmel was like this WebVR player with a gallery that opened up to a few canned experiences. And over time, it became a full-featured browser to today, where it's one of the most popular apps on Quest. I think that speaks to a lot of what Jen was saying around the role of the web, how easy it is to get up and developing for it. And also from the user perspective, just how much content there is, right? Like this is a new platform, immersive computing. And so having access to billions of pages and a diversity of use cases and content is something users want. And I think the fact that the browser is one of the most popular applications, it just kind of lines up with that really well. And so that makes us think about it as, a core part of people's experience with Quest. And so we invest in it as one of the main pieces of our experience. And in fact, the browser and the web's kind of pushing the boundaries on what the overall experience in a Quest headset looks like, with some of the stuff we've talked about over the last year, like infinite office and multitasking. Like that was not how Quest worked, when it first launched. And now you have multiple apps running at the same time. And a lot of that was driven by use cases from the web. So it's very much a core part of the platform for Oculus.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, as a web developer, it has always seemed obvious to me, of course, that the web was a natural way to produce XR. But it's interesting to hear that it is not just a sort of a bolted-on thing, but it's actually sort of becoming something that defines what the platform as a whole can do. Genevieve, do you have any examples or any sort of, are you seeing the same thing within AR? I know that the scale and the types of deployments that we're seeing for AR versus VR are pretty different. For more enterprise-focused work, are you seeing similar sort of, I don't know, reverse flow feedback from web usage into the native apps?
Yeah, I mean, we see actually a similar thing to what Facebook had, where the browser is actually one of the more popular applications on our device, and we do see some uptake with AR and specifically with enterprise around data visualization and communications and things like that. So we are seeing, definitely usage in that direction. There's also, I think, a lot of, a great portion of developers who want to use the web, who are asking for new features, this feature and that feature, and we will funnel those up through W3C. But they're certainly asking to use it because they see the benefits of it.
That's great. I mean, one aspect that I have been curious about for a while is not just at the application level, but also sort of at the operating system level. There's obviously a lot of places where web content or web applications can be sort of more tightly integrated into the operating system itself. So obviously on desktop and mobile, we have sort of installable web apps in the form of PWAs. And then also in mostly desktop browsers, we have things like web extensions that let you actually change the nature of what your web browser is doing and sort of interact more tightly with the operating system in a lot of cases, like accessing files or local resources in a different way. For either one of you, as you think about how your browsers will evolve, what are sort of the forces that you see for OS integration?
Yeah, I think I've been pretty public about how we're exploring PWAs for VR, and I think a lot of the motivation there is exactly what you're talking about. It's how do you make the web a more integrated part of the overall device and operating system experience? How do you help web developers have access to some of the discovery and distribution mechanisms that are made available to native apps? And how do you help users get the muscle memory around like launching these apps from their library and like having them more integrated into the overall system experience? I think that is something that's really interesting and lines up with a lot of the addresses a lot of the feedback that we hear from both developers and users. Of course, installable apps is like just one way to do that. I think the other angle here is ensuring that we're making all of the new device capabilities accessible to the web and web developers, and I think that's the name of the game in the immersive web working group. It's one of the reasons like why we push things like bringing hand tracking in and making like developer technologies like time warp layers for better performance. Like all of that is about helping web content work at a higher level and at the same level with native and be more integrated with the rest of the system experience.
Yeah, I agree. And, if you take a look at sort of what you do every day, even, outside of WebXR, back into the flat web, I mean, a lot of, we're having this conversation over the web, this video conference over the web, a lot of our tools, our email, our calendars, those are all also available through the web. Whatever systems you use in your day-to-day job, ticketing systems and like wiki pages and all the like data analysis tools that you guys do at your job, those are all available over the web. And so having a way to distribute those and package those up for users on a headset type device, I think is really, really important. And it's another way to access that kind of content. Yes, you can share links, but also being able to download something or push an app to a device, especially in the enterprise context, is really helpful. So Magic Leap did ship some progressive web app support back. I can't remember. COVID has warped my brain, but quite a few releases back actually. Yeah, so we've had that support for a little while, and it's definitely something that we think is important going forward. It provides a bunch of benefits, and especially in WebXR, because maybe in WebXR you don't need to, if you're going to launch an app, maybe you don't need to like click through all the screens required if you have a progressive web app. And I think that's one of those things that both users and developers have found really frustrating is the transition from flat web to, especially on headset devices, like an immersive experience, a stereoscopic immersive experience. So I think there's some things that might be safer to do in a web app that wouldn't be as safe to do just by clicking random links. And I think that's an opportunity for all of us to leverage that the amount of scrutiny that goes into an application over a random link.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Like, it's one of the things we've been seeing as we explore this as well. Like, that today, for very intentional reasons, there's a permissions model around getting access to WebXR. But you can imagine a PWA that is directly immersive, exclusively immersive, just like a native app. But there's no, PWA manifest doesn't have like display mode that's immersive, and so there's gaps like that I think we still have to close as a platform.
Yeah, I think we're at a really interesting point because, in part because it was the sort of lowest, the most important piece. We have focused on these sort of fully immersive sessions that sort of take over and take over your entire display, and the WebXR Session API is specifically for making sure that we do that in a safe, consistent way across random websites that may have different intentions. And so, right, these it's an interesting time because we can move forward, and like you say, we can change some of the permissions assumptions about PWAs. But I think we're also at a point where we're hearing more and more that people want to also be able to run, gadgets or small apps that don't necessarily take over your entire display, but maybe they run while you're doing something else, and they are spatial and they are three-dimensional, but they're not sort of the fully immersive WebXR session. I know a lot of people think about that specifically for AR, but I think it's also true in VR. Have you been hearing from your users that this is the kind of thing that you would like to work towards? Is that something you hear a lot?
Well, I think today the user experience of the web, at least in VR, is very very bimodal, right? Like you either have 2D web pages or you have completely immersive. And there probably is an opportunity to blur the lines there and create experiences that, across the spectrum of that. I know, we've had conversations in the working group around things like being able to peer through sort of a window, like a diorama style experience into a 2D web page, or what would it mean to be able to just embed a model into a 2D web page and have it float off the page, and I think that is both interesting from a use cases perspective, right? But also a developer one, right? You've still, the number of 2D pages relative to the immersive enabled web pages is astronomical. And so providing developers a way to progressively enhance the P and PWA really, and add in and layer in immersive capabilities, I think is really interesting as a way to kind of grow adoption. Don't have anything specific to announce there, but I do think that is an interesting place that right now we've kind of got this two distinct experiences, and they could probably be made more harmonious, and we probably uncover a bunch of really interesting user experiences in doing so.
Yeah, I think, Magic Leap does, currently support multi-applications. We call them landscape applications because they can sit in your landscape. As far as usage, I don't know that people are really ready for that yet. I think, for us, we're into tech. We understand 3D to some extent, and we're willing to suffer the consequences of emerging technology and put up with a lot of things to see our visions realized. I'm not sure that the rest of the market is ready for that. I think 3D is still very confusing for a lot of people. I don't think we've cracked all of the usability issues around having multiple applications and multiple windows, and losing stuff as you walk around. Like, where did I put this? I lose my phone daily, and so the same thing kind of happens to screens in some senses, right? Or to any 3D widget I might have floating in my space. I think there's some obvious use cases for consumers, like having screens and calendars and Tamagotchi widgets, things that you might weather apps, those kind of things that we might enjoy. But whether those transfer over to enterprise and whether consumers are ready for it right now, and I'm not totally sure. We're quite there yet. I think maybe we're a little too early to the party for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think on the 3D end of that spectrum, it's definitely more speculative. I think where we're seeing some of the demand for what we're talking about is on the 2D end of the spectrum, but in VR. I mentioned earlier around our work with multitasking and Infinite Office. That is something we hear very loudly from users. Humans are sort of inherently productive beings, and they like to do lots of things at once. So whether that's just a video on one side next to you're catching up on email, or whatever it might be, we hear a lot of demand from users to be able to leverage VR for that, because VR gives you this infinite screen, and you're not limited by the choice you made 2 years ago on what monitor you have or how you have them placed or whatever. And so that's definitely something we're working on. As it expands into actually having 3D objects and widgets, that's, I think, something yet to be figured out.
Yeah, it seems that once we got to be able to build things completely in 3D and immersively, what we realized was that we actually wanted some flat things in there as well, like screens, text, and things like that. And I think that's kind of really interesting. But I think it makes a lot of sense, because what are we used to? We're used to flat screens. We're used to reading books. We're used to reading phones. All those things are pretty flat. And there's a reason why we didn't all 3D print all of our books or use cuneiforms anymore, and because it's more efficient for it to be flat. You got a density information that way. So I think that's really interesting, and to see how this is going to migrate going forward.
Yeah, I think one of the running jokes about being working both on specs and on the software for the immersive web is that one of the #1 questions is, how do I put HTML on a texture in the 3D space? It's one of those things where it seems counterintuitive until you actually try to build things and you realize, right, we use flat signage everywhere because it's incredibly useful, and we need to sort of we can't leave that stuff behind as we move into spatial design.
Yeah, I mean, Magic Leap, we kind of moved. We in addition to doing WebXR, we kind of also took an approach of like, hey, let's take a flat thing and make it more 3D. Maybe that's outside of the scope of this discussion, but we have found that people wanted something like that, and if we can find a way to merge the two approaches, I think that makes a lot of sense. People already know CSS, so if you can use, and there already exists 3D CSS, so can we leverage that to somehow make 3D web pages? No matter whether it's immersive or not. And same with 3D models. There's Magic Leap has the prismatic models. There's also the model viewer. That's a component. There's Sketchfab, and whatever other rumors are floating around with other industry leaders. So I think there's a lot of interest in that, and like web pages, you just like add an image to with an image tag, and it's really easy. So how can we bring in some of those? How do we simplify some of those more complex 3D concepts? Back for more flat web developers.
Yeah, I think both directions makes a lot of sense. If we have this spectrum of like 2D content and completely immersive content, like how do you bring the 3D stuff into the 2D world? And then as you said, Trevor, like how do you bring 2D content into WebXR? A lot of tough challenges with that one, but it's one we're really passionate about because we think it unlocks a lot. And I think it's important to acknowledge this isn't just a web problem either, right? This is on a native, like building 2D UIs in game engines and things is actually quite hard, and the tooling there is not quite that sophisticated. So if we're able to unlock that on the web, like give you the full power of CSS and HTML5 and everything, like within a WebXR space, like the world is your oyster.
Yeah, and I guess another thing to mention is that rendering text in 3D legibly is not an easy problem to solve. Game engines, they do highly specific things to optimize it as you walk around, in a 3D space. And to do those things, without like a manual intervention, and to make it, good all the time, it's not an easy problem to solve, and I'm not sure anybody has solved it perfectly yet. I think we still have a long way to go, to make it to make it really good and to the level that I think consumers expect.
Yeah, I think that the Troika toolkit is one of the JavaScript libraries out there that's really focused on good font rendering, and it is non-trivial. I will say, every time I poke into that code, I am impressed with the level of effort it takes to actually pull that off in a legible way. So one thing that I want us to get to today is to talk about, sort of look a little bit forward and maybe even beyond. I know that both of you got into this work not just because of the existence of the company that you work for, but because you're interested in general. But sort of on a personal level, when you look forward, 5 years, what would you like to see? What's the story you would like to tell about how the community came together and solved problems, on a global scale that got us to some vision that you have about this future? Maybe Genevieve, if you'd like to go first. Yeah.
Wow, that's something.
It's a big question, I know.
Yeah, it's a pretty good question. I mean, I think what would be helpful, is a few good use cases. I think we've got games. We've got some cool art experiments and other things. But to really draw people in, you want to. I guess we work in tech because we like cool things, right? And we're willing to, we're willing to fiddle with stuff, and we're willing to work on stuff because we think it's interesting, even if it doesn't solve a problem. In my personal life, I don't buy any piece of tech unless it does something for me or makes my life better. I'm kind of a Luddite, actually. Even though I'm very high tech in my work, I'm kind of a Luddite in my personal life. And I think for a lot of people, that's going to be, a similar reason is, why would I need this? And until we have a thing where either it's it's a lot of fun, or it really helps with our communication, or we can use it for, we've really ironed out all the kinks in some sort of learning module or enterprise use cases. So I think as an industry, once we figure out what those things are, we can rally around the technology, and really build that out for those use cases while keeping all the other ones kind of, that the future thing that we all of our hopes and dreams, we can still keep those in the path, but, at least we have something to drive towards. So I think we'll start seeing that soon. I think we're kind of on the cusp of, stuff getting good enough that we can really, use it to solve things. I do get a lot of sort of asked hey, can we use WebXR for this? Can we use WebXR for that? And, a lot of times my answer is almost, maybe, soon. And I think we're almost at the almost maybe soon. And then we will really start to see stuff take off. And I think the other really big thing with WebXR specifically is tooling. And the ability to have really great sort of not just developer tools, but for artists and creators, and people are again solving problems. And because the standard's not there yet, I don't think the tooling's there. Right. We want to look back into our messy web history at Flash. One of the great things about it was the great tooling that came with it. Even though Flash itself had its problems, we saw a ton of content, a ton of solutions were written using Flash for various reasons, and one of those was great tooling. So I think we really need to, as an industry, if we want it to succeed, we really need that side of the industry partners to come up with a great solution, and I think we'll see more uptake.
I think that's a great point. I still see artists mourning the loss of the Flash tooling because it gave them so much power. Yeah. I think that would be a great vision if we could look back in 5 years and say, we now have something that is fondly thought of as Flash was before. Jacob, how about you?
Yeah, well, it is an ambitious question. I think I ground myself in the answer and reminding myself that at least WebXR itself is still in its infancy. It's about 18 months or so since it was on by default on the Oculus platform. So we should level our expectations around where content and the ecosystem should be at this point. And I think over those 18 months, the growth curve has been really impressive. I think we've gone from just a lot of lightweight tech demo, proving out the APIs and demonstrating kind of signs of life of VR capabilities, and to now where it was a ton of fun to work with. I'm so happy you're chatting with Active Theory and working with them on Secret Sky, seeing blockbuster VR content built on the web. The work that the impact that things like Hubs or Frame are having in the enterprise space, creating social experiences. You're starting to see content really mature, and that is really exciting. So at this stage, I think the name of the game is building a tighter loop with developers to understand what are the pain points and what are kind of keeping them from going to the next level with that content. And we've been doing a research study with a lot of developers working in WebXR. Out of that, we hear a number of different things, and we're trying to have a fast kind of response time to things that we hear from developers. One of the things we heard was, we recommend content in the browser and try to drive discovery of content, and it wasn't clear how do you get into Oculus's recommendations. So we published a bunch of developer documentation on that. As we started to explore PWAs and really just this larger platform, we realized documentation isn't really that great today. So we've joined the Open Web Docs, and that's going to be a big push for us around helping fill out the resources that developers need to understand this novel technology. And then I think it's helping them actually be successful, investing in partnerships and relationships to help push content boundaries, push discovery, push engagement, solve problems that aren't solved yet. Monetization is still challenging in this space, so pushing the envelope there and really listening to developers, I think, will be key. And yeah, I think Jen's right. Tooling is a big ingredient of this. It's still at a very early stage. There is no killer framework yet, or frameworks. And I think we have big shoes to fill relative to where tooling is at for native 3D content. And I think there's a lot of work to go there as well.
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing signs of life in things like the metaverse session that we saw earlier, and Wonderland and Play Canvas. But yeah, I agree. Thank you both so much for coming on and telling us about where you are today with the browser and where we're headed. So I appreciate it a lot. I know that it is the enabling piece for a lot of these sort of far-reaching visions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks for setting this up. This is an amazing event.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having me.